Bitcoin has crashed down to sub $80,000 and has rebounded all the way back up towards 95,000, back to 80,000 again, and is now sitting once more at $90,000, all within the span of about 7 to 10 days. Is the bottom in for this current correction on Bitcoin? Can we look for a move back towards the all-time highs? Are we coming up to put in a lower high and then just continuing lower over time? Here's my outlook on Bitcoin and the key regions on the lines in the sand, so to speak, on what I'm looking for that move to the upside, for the confirmation for more downside, and just kind of covering how the price action ended up moving over these last few days, even though it may seem like it was in tandem with certain news events like the crypto Bitcoin reserve, as well as the tariff news, as well as potentially tariffs getting canceled right after that. I mean, it's just been a headwind so far. So let's just look at the technicals here and see how Bitcoin has been reacting. Locally, I have about 4 levels on the chart right now. And the number one for any kind of downside continuation is going to be this one right here, which is about 80,000, 80,000. Let's just call it nice rounded 80K. If we start to close daily candles below that region, that is kind of the confirmation of a move much lower, in my opinion. I don't think that the CME gap would save us. I don't think that a move back down, back testing the previous high, would be what we'd come and see. I believe we'd have a very deep correction on our hands at that point, very similar, not to, kind of compare apples to oranges here, but very similar to what we did see back here in the summer of 2021, right, where we had this, a high put in, you got a nice drop. We basically ran it back to the golden pocket, and then you had a lower drop come after that. And let's just kind of look at, the market now, where like not comparing it in the same sense, but just to look at it in the sense of just any other move. When we see either a drawdown like this or even a push higher, when you look for the Fibonacci retracements, just what would that look like in the short term, right? So for me, if we're going to see that, push up and potentially into a lower high and then continuation to the downside, could we have already seen it here? Potentially. Once again, we're kind of in a little bit of no man's land in this little mid range here. 80K is the determining factor at this point. A similar move like we've seen in the past many times, not just in 2021 summer, is where we see any asset really return to about a gold pocket region. You'd look to see any kind of reaction there, potentially a rejection, and then you get that continuation to the downside, right? So let's just see where the gold pocket does sit currently. Luckily, it is actually where I just drew this out to, but that sits at about $98,000. Let's just call it 100 in that region, right? I'm saying that more on a broader spectrum here. Obviously, as a trader, I'm looking for a little bit more of a precise area there. And here as well, just notably that we are sitting at the 382 retracement here now, right? Even though we've kind of punched through it, we're sitting in around that region here, 90,400. So, there's definitely a case where we push up and we really have to kind of come through this region here at 98,000 to see any kind of real strength, to be honest with you. Even in this region here, I mean, it's just overall really range bound activity. We have a high potential that we put in a high up here. We've just come down and put in a substantial low. So anywhere in this region, honestly, does give us a risk of putting in a lower high. And then we have to be aware of a rollover into a deeper correction. There's always going to be fear of that. And, that's just how the market is designed. Of course, as an investor, as a trader, I myself, I have to be aware of these things, but at the same time, I have to be able to put on risk at some, key regions. And when I look across the broad market, as far as crypto would go, yes, I could see things still coming down a little bit more. There's 20 and 30%, drops to be had in some of the altcoins, even still to some key regions. However, some things are just down so substantially that, I have to be able to, like I said, put on some risk here at these points, anticipating, a reversal to the upside. All right. And we can look for continuation and confirmation as we kind of breach into these regions here. However, in that case, if we're going to come and start putting in, some structure at this point and wait for the higher low at this area here, or even a break above the highs, you're going to be entering pretty late into those situations, right? These are like 20 and 30% moves on Bitcoin. I'm sure the altcoins would see a substantial move, assuming that maybe this is our current low before the next leg up, right? So once again, insinuating or really highlighting here, this is our line in the sand. which we came down to really nicely. This was our yearly pivot, by the way, for anyone that's not aware of this. This is the average of price of last year, very similar to a moving average that just does not move. So when you look at things coming into like a 200-day moving average, this is a 365 non-moving average. The average for 365 days, which the price does tend to come back to. And we've done that so far. I prefer that we did that now and we didn't front run it ahead of, because that's just something we would have had to kind of constantly be aware of for the rest of this year. But now it's just the game of, do we come up and put in a lower high, continued lower, or can we actually break through? So I'm going to play a little, devil's advocate here on more of a bullish idea. So a couple weeks back, I was highlighting the quarterly pivot, we had a shark, a shark setup up here, which was a bearish reversal pattern right at the high, which had a few targets, one of which being 86,000. 86,000 was very important to me because this was also from our swing low back last summer. It was also our 382 retracement, which generally when you have a really strong move up to the upside, we do not come all the way back down to like the golden pocket. We'll see a shallower retracement. And that around that 382, sometimes the 0.5, which actually, if we clicked on the 0.5, that's exactly where we came down to looking at it in this state, right? So on top of the yearly pivot, it was the 0.5. When we're looking at a range, I'll pull up here in a second. This was actually the range low for last quarter as well. So this whole little, really wasn't much of an area. 7 or 8% was a really big key region. So I was looking for a reaction at that 382, potentially to see a similar situation like we saw last year, right? Where we just kind of popped down and then, kept it going. We did punch a little lower, which, like I said, honestly, I'd prefer it because we came down and tagged a very high time frame average, and so far holding it really strongly. And on top of that, we closed a weekly candle really strongly. And on top of that, look at how we're holding now above that 382, right? So you came down, for a few days, I guess, I will say that for a few days here, we were looking, not to hold that region. So I was like, all right, well, it's really just coming down to this area now. And if we lose that, once again, a deeper correction is to be had. But for now, we've come down. You got a nice little strong impulse move. We've come down, tagged a high time frame area right here. We've closed it back up. So now it's just a nice wick through of that 382, holding it as support. Right. So right there, that $86,000. And what else did we do right here? Right. So, I bring up that 382, like I said, because it's a huge area where we're looking to hold this, for retrace and then continuation. And I think that we have a little bit of a case here for that. Right. So as long as we're holding above, and once again, it's 80K. So it's a little wide from where we are now. It's about $10,000 difference here. But in the meantime here, I'm going to break this down a little more locally. So not only did we come down, meet those key areas we were talking on, if we look at our previous quarter range here, right? So this was our range from Q4 of last year, which we started off at the highs, and generally just like, and every day, every week, every month, every quarter, 6 months, year, we have the previous session data to run off of once those sessions are closed. And in this regard, I'm talking about a quarterly. So once the quarter closed at the end of the year, we have a whole quarter now of previous data that we can utilize and work off of. And generally, especially while we're within that range, you're going to see a rotation, to the low. And I noted pretty heavily in the beginning of this quarter while we were targeting that shark reversal, right? The shark reversal pattern right here that, had that quarterly pivot area, the 86K not held. It was very likely to rotate the range. And when I say rotate, I mean rotate from the high to the low in this case. And on top of that, we had the yearly pivot high time frame average sitting down here. Now, super, 15-minute time frames. Yeah, we punched down another like 2-3%. But overall, on a 4-hour daily, a weekly, all we've done here, deviate the high right there. Like I said, closed out that shark reversal pattern. We saw a move down to the low here of the range. And now what we're looking for is to see if this holds and potentially another range rotation back to the upside. So we've got a 382 macro wise being held right now. We've got a range rotation. We've got high time frame averages being met and held. All very technical things to see. Locally, we've got a potential change in structure here, right? So we've got a higher low at the moment. We'll be looking to see if we actually come through and take out this high now. We've got a couple of volume targets up here in that area. So it would be, pretty notable to come up to that region. Not an end all be all that's just a complete bullish reversal at that point. But for me, I'm leaning to say that we could see that, right? So 80K will be where things change. And I have to be able to adapt to that. And literally just a week ago, before we came down to some of the other levels in areas on Ethereum and stuff like that, I was leaning a little bit more that we would probably see a lot more downside, right? And as a trader and as an investor and just as someone who's been in the space, I have to be able to interpret the data as it comes and the new data when it comes, right? So for me, I think that there is a likeliness, right, that we could have put in a pretty substantial low here. We've got a possible market structure change here, so we want to see that continue here. For me, I'm actually targeting back up to this $104,000 area. I think it's quite likely that we see that in the coming days here. And then once again, if things change, if we start to just crash down below 80,000, start closing dailies below that, at that point, I think we have a larger correction on our hands. And assuming that we can kind of continue this upward trajectory at the moment, we've got a potential for a harmonic pattern that comes up and completes around that $104,000, $105,000 area. So that is what I'm looking for next, with a couple of other areas all kind of, converging in this region. If you enjoyed this content, please consider giving me a like and subscribe to the channel down below. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. And if you'd like to join the CVO Trading Discord, where I present all of my analysis, updates, short-term, long-term, mid to long-term plays, altcoins, Bitcoin, Ethereum, what you have it, stock market as well, my 18 to 20-year housing market outlook. Everything is in the Discord link down below, where you could join via the WAP website. Aside from that, hope you'll have a great rest of your day. I'll see you all in the next video. And until then, everybody, cheers.